Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you here to our webinar here today. We're going to be doing part one of Formulas 101. We will be covering the general aspects of formulas. We're going to do part of it this month and part of it next month. You'll get notification on that. First of all, to introduce myself, I am BJ Yoder. I am with the tech support department and the sales department here at AllMax. Just so you know who you're talking about, just a little bit about myself. I've been in the wastewater industry for going on 35 years. Done everything from being an operator to being a superintendent. So I've covered all aspects in the wastewater field. What we're going to do today is we're going to discuss formulas. Formulas in Operator 10. This will cover how you write formulas, the general process of formulas themselves, and we will go through the whole aspects of it. This week we're going to kind of give a general idea today of formulas and the process of creating formulas, how to go and write formulas, attach them to location parameters, things along that lines. The next session, the part two session, what we would like to do, and we'll remind you this at the end of the session today, that if you would be able to go, if you have formulas that you'd like to see written and maybe how they could be written in Operator 10, you will be getting a form on that at the end of the webinar today, that you can go and submit formulas that you would like to see put into Operator 10, how they would be written in Operator 10. And then our next session, we're going to kind of take those formulas and add them into the program, and we'll show you how to walk through that process with those formulas. Now, formulas in general. How we go in here is the formulas we're talking about can be done in any of the operations programs. So Operator 10, the wastewater, the water, or Synexus programs, all the formulas will be written the same way. In fact, you will access them in the same general purpose of how we go through. Now, as we're doing formulas and as you create formulas in the program, one of the things to remember is usually what you're going to have to do is create a parameter, a location parameter, to go and add the formula to. So if you aren't familiar, under setup, you can go to LP setup and location parameter. This gives you a list of your current location parameters that you have, any formulas that you're going to be attached, and things along that lines. So for our purpose today, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a brand new location, and we're just going to call it, just for our today, we're going to call it formula. We're going to go and, again, don't have to put a description. We're going to attach it to a facility. But then what we want to do when you create a formula is you're going to want to attach the formulas to given location parameters. Okay, so when we write a formula and we create and we attach it, there is always going to be well, not always, but 90% of the time, you're going to attach that formula to a location parameter. Now, some suggestions that I do, because ones that I have done in the past, is I will go and, for example, some very basic ones, BOD pounds, ammonia, phosphorus, TSS pounds. What I usually like to do is I like to create my own parameter that explains what I'm doing. So in this case here, we have a list of parameters that I have created for my pounds results. And again, this is where I'm going to be putting pounds at. Okay, I'm going to look at the different things and I'm going to write the formulas to go and attach them to here. So I'm just going to grab a couple of these just so we have some things to look at here, and we can go and grab those and we can add those to the parameter. Now, again, what you're going to do is you're going to attach those where you want to see the results at. Now, when we come up with that, so you may be using your plant effluent or your final effluent, maybe where you're wanting to add these and attach them and store that data. Now, there are some exceptions. Maybe you want to go and create a location, and I've done this in the past, where you go and you create a location called chemicals. Inside that chemicals location, you track your levels of your chlorine or chemical polymers or whatever things that you're going to be tracking in there. You track that and then you convert it to pounds. And then maybe you have cost associated with it. You have a complete flexibility at that point when you're using your formulas. But you want to be able to go and add things to that. So again, back to creating a parameter. Let's say we want to go and we want to do a percent removal maybe. I've created formulas before that do BOD removal, so we can add percent removal. This is all up to you on how you do it and how you label these. I like to keep them as much as possible so that I'm going to by visually, I can look and see what it is. Just a refresher, to create a new parameter, all you have to do is hit the plus button. This allows you to go and create whatever parameter you want to do. And then you can save it and then you can use it over and over again. Another thing that I'm going to do here on our test to locate our formula location is I'm also going to add a couple parameters just for formula purposes, such as flow, because we may need that. I'm going to go ahead and add the BOD, and we'll add some ammonia here as well. Again, the idea is just to have stuff so we can use it as reference and we can put data in. You can kind of see how this works. So we're going to go ahead and save this one. Now, when you are in your location parameter list and you're wanting to do formulas, there are a couple ways that you can access formulas and how you can create formulas inside the program. First of all, we can come in here under the setup here at the top, and we can actually go into the formula section here. This will give you a list of any formulas that have been already defined for your program. But this is also where you can also create them. All right. From right here, you can go in, we can hit the plus sign, and we can go and we can start creating formulas from here. Now, one of the things that I always like to do, because of how formulas are attached, I always like to write formulas from the location parameter list. And the reason being is this: when I come in here and I create a formula, again, I've created a parameter such as BOD pounds. All right, we'll make this real simple. I can come in here under attach formula and I can click on the three dot button here, the ellipses button, and this gives me a list of all my formulas. Now at this point, if I go ahead and hit the plus sign, I'm back to where I was at, where I showed you earlier here, where we were at that location where we can actually go in and start writing the formula. The benefit to doing it this way is once the formula is created, and we'll show you that here, but once the formula is created and it shows up in the list and I OK it, it'll actually be attached right here to the parameter I want to do it. So it just makes it a little, I always like to do it that way. It's not a necessity. It's not mandatory that you do it that way. That's just how I like to do it, just to make it a little bit easier, because usually when I'm writing formulas, I'm creating location parameters and writing the formulas at the same time. And it may not be that way in your case, but that's how I usually do it. And it just makes it a little bit easier for me. My old brain doesn't think best sometimes. And so I like to go and make it so that when I'm done, I'm right where I'm at and where I need to be. It just saves me steps, in other words. So things to remember when we're writing formulas, okay? When we're in the formula list, one of the things to remember is when you create a new formula, First thing to remember is you're always going to pick a facility in which you're attaching it to. All your databases, all your location parameters have a facility with them. Most of you are probably have one facility, so it's not a real big issue. If you have multiple facilities, you need to decide which facility you're going to be using and attaching that formula to. The next process is formula name. Now, what I always like to do here is I like to name the formulas what it is. If I'm looking at pounds of BOD, you will look in my list. A lot of times when I go and when I create a formula, I will call it what it actually is, BOD pounds. And it just makes it easier to find things later if I'm going to write a formula, whatever name you want to give it. One thing with names, and this is pretty much anywhere in the program, but also in formulas, try not to use the uppercase keys like the pound sign, the hashtag, and sign, percent signs. Try not to use those in the names. Sometimes, depending on how things are done, it could possibly mess up how formulas run or whether the formula will run at all. So I always try to keep that as just put it in words, just type it out. You've got a good amount of space here to type words in of what you want. So I usually just type it out to make it that way. The benefit of putting it out by typing out what it actually is, what you end up with then is if somebody new's looking at that formula, they don't even really have to look at the formula itself. They can look at the name of the formula and realize, oh, okay, that's what I need. So if you're looking at location parameters in a data view and there's a formula attached to it, if you look at the formula that's attached, and let's say it is BOD pounds, for example, and you look at it and you look at the formula and it says ammonia pounds. Well, you know right away, just without even looking at the formula, that's probably wrong. So you'll have to change that. But it just makes it easier to understand kind of how we're doing things from that standpoint. So we're going to just create a new name here. And I'm just doing it this way so that I know where I'm at because I already have a BOD pounds formula in there. So I'm going to create a name called BOD pounds. Now, the next thing we do when we create a formula is we attach it to a location parameter. Now, as I mentioned before, if I'm coming in from a location parameter to get to this point, when I go and I complete the formula and I back it back out and I okay it all the way out, this formula will already be attached. So in essence, I don't have to attach it to a formula. I mean, to an LP here. But if you want to, it is not a problem. You can do so. And we'll talk about also here when we write a formula, if we write a formula that I'm using the same formula in several different locations, this is also a good place to attach them all at once. Again, we'll talk about writing generic ones here in a minute. So to attach a formula to an LP, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the three-dot button. This will bring up a blank screen and it's going to look at what ones I've selected to attach it to. So when I hit the plus sign, this brings up my location parameter list. I know I want to do BOD pounds. And we're going to do the one for formula. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab that one right now because that's the location parameter that I want to attach it to. When I go and I grab that and I hit OK, it brings it to the list. So when I say OK again, that is showing me right here, this is the one that I have attached it to. All right. And that way we know where we're attaching that formula. This particular formula is going to be attached to this LP. Now, you have a remark box. Now, one of the things that I like to do in the remark box, and I don't do it all the time, but sometimes I do, especially if it's a complicated formula, I kind of like to put in English what this formula means and how it's done if you were doing it manually. The reason I like to do that, and again, it's a reference to make sure that the formula is written correctly, or if somebody goes in and looks and says, how's this formula working? They have some reference. You can also put notes in here about the formulas you're doing, maybe about if you're doing a volatile solids reduction, for example, maybe you want to write some notes about how it is and how we're working it. But again, it's just a notes field on how you do that. Now, when it comes to writing formulas in the software, there are some things that make things easier, and how we do things and how we write the formulas. And we have what is called functions. Functions built into the program. There is a list of them. You can do a drop down here and you can see this entire list of them. It can be confusing on how you're finding stuff and things along that lines. So what I like to do is I like to click on the formula help button. Even though I've written thousands of formulas in my career, I still probably use this formula help button a lot of times. And the reason being, this gives me a breakdown of formulas, functions that are available. And when we say functions, they're things to make the process of setting up the formula easier. Here is an example, a function that we have, and it's a daily data function. And you can search this by alphabetical, you can search it by group, whatever. Um, Daily data functions, this is just a list of functions that we have in here. One of them that we use quite a bit, and I run across a lot, is what we call a demeter function. What a demeter function does is this. This allows you to go and define a meter reading, and then based on that meter reading, flow will be calculated, or run hours will be calculated, whatever, or usage will be calculated depending on how we do that. So for example, if I have a flow meter reading, I can take it and I can use this D meter and I can use it to calculate my flow in million gallons a day. Now, why would I do this? I can just go and say today minus yesterday, and that gives me a value. Well, this function, and this is what happens with a lot of functions that we have in the program, this function allows you to go and allows to take care of things. So for example, in this one here, one of the things that we do is, again, you're going to pick the location parameter of your meter reading, but then we have an offset. Okay, the offset here says what day we're rating it to. So when it runs this function, it looks at today, it subtracts yesterday. If we put a 0 in there, it'll write it to today. But if I want that result to be yesterday, we put a 1 in there. So that means it offsets 1 day. So today minus yesterday, write the value to yesterday. That's what that offset will do. You can go back 2 days if you want, but I mean, usually it's just 1 day. You're writing it for yesterday. Another thing that it allows is it allows you to put in a maximum meter reading. By putting in a maximum meter reading, you do not have to worry about when that that totalizer goes back to 0. You don't have to worry about putting an extra number in there so that the values are correct. So if I go in, I put a max meter reading in, and today's value was 5 and yesterday's value was 99,850. Well, if you subtract 5, you do that 99,850 and you subtract it from 5, you're going to get a negative number. Well, because of us having a max meter reading in here, what this allows us to do is when it sees it drop below what that max meter reading is again, internally, the program will add numbers to it to make it so it comes out right. And it's only doing it for that one value, okay? So what it would be, instead of 5, it would be 100,005. And then it would subtract the 99,850 from that. And it does it internally. It doesn't show up anywhere, but internally, because of the demeter function, that is built into that function programming wise to make that work. Okay, so that's a nice feature about that, is because it handles your rollovers. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to do some type of a multiplier, or divide by, whichever. And this allows you to convert it that number to the correct thing. So if you get a number and you want to convert it to million gallons a day, you would go and you would put a multiplier in there to get that. If there is no multiplier in there, all you have to do, maybe it's the actual number, just put a 1. And that will take care of that. Again, this is just an example of a function and how it works. Now, if with this exact same function, if you're wanting to use meters that count down, so in other words, you're using usage. So if I have polymer and I have 100 gallons yesterday and I have 50 gallons today, and I want to know the difference, I can go and put a negative number for that max meter reading. So if it's like 1,500 gallon tank, you could go put a minus 1,500. So then it'll break down accordingly. And then when it refills and changes, it adjusts accordingly. But this is just one example of what these functions do. I'm going to show you a couple others, but this is the neat thing about the help file for the function help. It takes you right here automatically. This allows you to go through, and there's different functions all over the place that you can use for different things, mathematical functions, date functions, true false functions. And again, we'll go through some of those here in a little bit. But this is, just keep this in mind. Like I said, I still use it all the time because I don't want to remember all the functions that we have available. So now, getting to writing the formula. Now, we said this is going to be a BOD pounds formula, okay? Now, I'm just going to write something in here so that you can, this is what we're doing. So I have, to write a formula for BOD pounds, I'm going to need what? I'm going to need BOD concentration. I'm going to need, and I'm going to multiply it, whoops, I'm going to multiply it times 8.34, which is our constant. And I'm going to multiply it times the flow in million gallons a day. That is our basic formula. That is, if I was going to write this, this is where I would take this and I would put it up here in the remarks. Okay, that just gives us some reference of what we're doing. So now, how do we write the formula? When we do anything that we do here, we are basing it off of location parameters, like I mentioned before. So we're going to have a BOD concentration. We're going to have a parameter, location parameter for that. Again, this is a constant, so we don't need to worry about that. But then we're also going to have a location parameter for flow as well. So to write this formula just the way we did, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here where it says location parameters, a 3-dot button there. What this does is this gives us a list of all our location parameters we have, just like we did when we were selecting attaching to. So let's figure out what we need. We know we're going to need BOD. And I'm going to grab the plant effluent just so you can see what it does. So when I grab the plant effluent BOD and I hit OK, it puts this in there in brackets. Okay, so it's going to be bracket location colon parameter close bracket. This is very important. Now, sometimes what happens is somebody goes and says, well, I know what I need, and I just go and I type it in. So I type in effluent BOD. Well, that means nothing in the program. That is not legit. You want to go and use what is picked from the location parameter list. And the reason being is when you do that, it puts it in the format that the program needs to understand. And this is an important part, because having that, it gives us the format that we need. The program knows what to look at. Okay, so we picked our effluent BOD. Again, multiply it times 8.34 and multiply it again. Now we're going to look for flow in million gallons a day. So same process. We go up here to the location parameter. We can filter. I mean, that's one of the things that's nice about the program. We can filter. So I want to go and filter for million gallons a day, and I'm going to pick the effluent flow because that's the one I need. So when I grab it and I hit OK, this would be what our formula would look like. All right, so now we have the ability to test this formula to make sure it's going to work. So how we do that is down here at the bottom is we pick a date that we have values for. And if I am correct, I have 02, I think I have data on that date. Yes, I do. And by putting a date that I have values for, it will give me a test result. All right. Now, how do I know this is correct? And this is a little trick that I use when I'm testing formulas and I want to make sure maybe I have a value that I'm not getting a result for some reason. And I want to see how this is going to work. So in this case here, I do get a result, but I want to run it mathematically by hand. So what I want to do is I want to be able to put it in my calculator, okay, so I can test it. So to do that and to find out what values are without having to go to a data view and finding the information that I need, I can do it very simply by highlighting bracket to bracket of a given location parameter. In this case, I'm doing it by the BOD, and then I click the exclamation point here to the right. By doing that, it'll tell me that that selected text on 2222, that value was 7.35. So I can take that value, 7.35, and I can multiply it times 8.34 because we know that's the next part, okay? Then I can come back in here and I can do the same thing with flow. So when I highlight it, my flow value is 10.88. So back to my formula, my calculator, I can multiply it by 10.88 and 66.93312, which is, when I go here, 666.93312. It is the exact same value. So I know the formula is correct. It is work based on the data that is in the program. That is the value I'm going to get. Now, one of the things that you can do, let's say, for example, you don't have data in here. Maybe you haven't entered data for BOD or flow or something like that, but you still want to test this formula. One of the things that you can do is down here at the bottom, we have use values from test data, okay? I'm just going to delete some of this out so you can see. So when we select this, what it does is the first LP value in this case, which is our BOD here, if I put a 12 in there, okay? That means that's going to be that, okay? Now my second LP, which would be the flow, okay? I want to go and put 5.5. So now I get a 550.44. So we can check that, are we correct just by going here, and I can do 12 times 8.34 times the 5.5, I get a 550.44. I'm using data that I know that I can go and make that work. So it gives you the ability of doing that way. Another thing that you can do when you're first setting up is using actual data from location parameters. Since we have true location parameters in here, and we'll talk about generic ones here in a second, that automatically pulls it in correctly. But I would keep that in mind. If you go and you write a formula and you think you have data, double check your date. Make sure you have data for it. I'm thinking I might have no data on one of these. Yep. I'd have to look, but if you don't have data, you may not get a result. That's why you go and you can check what you're looking for on that given day. All right. Now, when we test a formula and when we do a review, well, it's not even when we test, when we run a formula in the program and we run the formula and the formula gets ran, it gets written to the database. We automatically it is stored in the database in 15 places. So in this case here, all these values will be here past the decimal, even though I'm not showing it. Maybe I'm not showing the decimals. Maybe I'm only showing one. Maybe I'm not even showing any decimal places on the data view. That data will still be in there out that far. The reason we do that, that's just one of those things. It's to me, and how we figure it's actually more accurate because we are going out from that standpoint. Now, one of the things we can do, if I want to round this down to a given amount, one of the things that we can do is we can group it. So we group everything via uh, parentheses, and I can use a function that is called round. Okay, so if I do round and I do a comma and I want it to 0, it takes all that extra off of that. And so this would only be written to the database. So you can round things so it makes it a little bit easier from that standpoint. Okay. Again, up to you on how you're wanting to do it. I very seldom do a round unless it's something that the client has asked for and they want it as an actual event, an actual thing. So when we go in, we write our formula, we have it written, then all we do is we hit save. When we hit save, what it does is it adds it to the list alphabetically. All right. Now here is something that you have to understand with formulas. Formulas, when they are ran in the program, so when you're in your data view and you hit calculate and it runs the formulas, it is looking at those in the order in which they're added. Okay. So to see how this was added at the bottom. So when we go to calc order here and we pull it up, again, it's going to ask for the facility. This is a list of all the formulas in the order in which they are ran. So what happens here is the BOD and the biosolids and the internal formulas, then it starts running all these formulas and they run in this order. Now, if you have a formula, if you see that you're having to run calculate twice or maybe even 3 times to get results, check your calc order. You are probably out of sync. So for example, if I took this copy flow and it was after my pounds ones, then most likely what would happen is I'd have to run twice to get my results. Okay. Because it's going to run through, it's not going to be able to calculate these BOD, these pounds ones. It's going to be able to calculate this and it'll calculate everything else. Then when I run it a second time, well, I've already got my flow value. So now it's going to calculate those pounds. That's why it is very important to do a calc order as you go. Okay. Just makes it a little bit easier and you just save it. And then once you have it, the calculation order and it's in the correct spot, you go and you have it highlighted, you hit OK. Then it is now attached to that location parameter. So when we go and we have that, it will allow us to go in and it's attached. Even though we went in the formula box in the formula editor and added it there, it would allow that to happen and it would still attach it. But that is the key. It has to be attached. All right. So now let's go back into our formula again. And I'm going to edit the formula. One of the things that's nice, and just to kind of let you know, if I have a formula that is exactly the same, but I want to change it. Let's say I want to do this for influent. Instead of changing it or creating a brand new one, I can also do an add similar. When I do add similar, what it does is it goes and it puts the same name in there, so I have to change it to influent or raw. And then I just have to come in here and highlight and I change which ones we want. Okay, that's important because if you don't change it, then that's going to run into an issue at that point. But that allows you to create one from that standpoint. Now, some other functions that we can do in here, for example, and again, we're just going to go, let me just edit this one here, and we're going to do some different things. I showed you this round function that I talked about. One of the things that we can also do, and from a standpoint of a formula, let's say we have to add 3 things together. Okay, I don't care what they are, and I'm just going to grab 3 to begin with. And I can come in here and I'm just going to grab oh, Well, let's do flows. I'm going to add these flows together. So for example, I'm going to add the influent flow plus and again, we're just doing stuff just so you can kind of see. It doesn't matter. Um, you'll actually use stuff the way it is. True location parameters, not just stuff that we're making up here. But let's say I go in here and I add these three together, all right? And I add these three together, all right? This would work fine if I have a value for each day, for each one of these on a day. So as you can see right now, I am not getting a result for this formula. Now, why is that? Well, let's take a look and let's see what data we actually have. So on the 4th, if I highlight my location parameter, I click this, I don't have a value for this, for my influent flow on the 4th. Do I have an EQ value on the 4th? No. Do I have an effluent value on the 4th? Yes. So out of those three, I only have one of them that has a value. Okay. So when we do this, this formula would not produce a result, even though I have a value for the effluent flow. It wouldn't produce a result because the other two are blank. And that is because of how pluses, additions, and subtractions work. So to make a formula that adds those together, whether any are blank or not, we use a function. We're going to go back to the function help. Again, we can look at these. We'll sort alphabetically, and I can come in here and I can go to the S. There is a function called sum. What this allows you to do is go for non-blank values, it'll add them together. So this is a function. Again, we have it in here, you can look at it. So if I write this formula this way, SUM, open parentheses, and then instead of the plus sign, I put a comma, and I do that for both of them, and I put a closing parentheses, I now get a test result because it eliminates those blanks, all right? This is also the same way if I'm wanting to do an average. A lot of times you'll see people, they will write a formula, they need an average, and it is going to be an average of 3 blanket depths, for example. Well, and you go and you add to do it manually, you would add those three together and you would divide it by 3. Okay, well, what if you have 2? Well, then you're going to add those two together and divide it by 2. But you could do that, but you'd have to change the formula all the time. If you're doing the same thing, but you want an average, you change the sum to the function of average. This allows you then, what it'll do is it'll add all three together and divide it by the number of actual values. In this case, there's only one value, so it's going to give you it's going to give you the same value. If there was something for the EQ feed and the effluent, it would add those together and divide it by 2. So the average would always work. Again, the idea being here is this is just different ways of looking at the data and being able to do that. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was creating formulas that what we call generic. Okay, so an example, I'm going to use my BOD pounds that I wrote earlier, and I'm going to show you this. Now, what this does is this. The formula looks the same, the difference being it doesn't have the locations. It just has the parameters. So for example, this tilde right here is actually where the location name would go. Same way with this here on the BOD. Now, why do I write it this way? In this case here, I have written it so that I could write it generically from the standpoint of being able to go and use any place that I have flow million gallons a day and BOD at the same spot. So if I have those at the influent or the primary effluent or the final, I have those two parameters at that location, By doing this and putting that tilde in there, that will replace the tilde with any location that I attach this formula to. So we can go up here and we can look because it says multiple. I have it attached to multiples. So I have this formula attached to the BOD pounds at the effluent, the influent, the primary effluent, and the secondary effluent. So what will happen is where we see if I'm doing it to the effluent, what it does is it will replace this flow, this tilde with the word effluent. Same way with this, and or change it to effluent, or whichever one I have it attached to. So instead of writing 4 separate formulas to make it work, I've written one that will work at all locations. Just a simpler way of writing a formula from that standpoint. But it gives you generic, you just have to make sure that in this case here, that I would have flow at all those locations and I have BOD at those locations. If I don't have a flow and I have a BOD, let's say I want to use my effluent flow for my BOD pounds at all those locations. I could do the same thing, but instead of doing this, what we will do, instead of a generic, we can go and we can grab my effluent flow. So then it would use my effluent flow times 8.34 times the BOD at these locations. But I would use my effluent flow, so I wouldn't have to use the flow there. Again, the idea being is think about how you're using it, how you're pulling the data in. Key behind locations of formulas, and this is the biggest key, is always use this pop-up buttons to get your location parameters. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you one that's a little bit more complex, and this will give you something to think about over the next month. So in case you're having formulas to do the same thing, you're needing something done the same way. One of the things that we can do is I like to go and let's say I want to do a percent removal, okay? But I want to do the percent removal not on a daily basis, but I want to do it on the monthly average of my influent and my effluent. I want to do it on monthly average. Well, one of the things that we can do, and if I do it that way, I don't want to write that result on every single day. So what we can do is we can give it a name. We'll do it on BOD. Whoop. Yeah, I ran out of space, of course. It'll be BOD. Okay. And we're going to run it on that. So we'll just give it that name here. So we got it. And we'll do it on BOD. So I want this value. And usually when I write formulas and I want to just show one value for the month, I always put it on the last day of the month. And the reason being because it's reflecting every day, all the data before that. So to get it so that we can write a formula and put it on the last day of the month, this is how the formula would work. We would use an if-then statement. And some of you are probably familiar with if-then statements because of Excel and things along that lines. But this is basically what we're doing. So what we want to do is we want to go, if it's the last day of the month, I want to go and I want to do this formula. Else I leave it blank. That's basically what we're going to do here. So if the day of month so that I can find what that last day of the month is, no matter what it is, because I could put 31 or I could put 28, but it wouldn't always work. But if I do the function of DOM, which stands for day of month, if the current day of month, that's what I'm stating right here, is equal to, we go very simple, length of month. So if the day of month is equal to the length of month, so in other words, if it's the last day of the month, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write my formula. And again, we talked about doing this on the monthly average. So if we go here and we do M underscore AVG, and these are functions that are in the formula help that you can look for. So our BOD in. So let's find our BOD in. our influent BOD. And there are some parameters here that we say so that we can calculate what it is. It's just some functions that we have in here. If the in minus out, and again, we're going to use the same function, and we'll grab the effluent one this time. And the effluent BOD, same parameters here. Okay, so in minus out, and I always like to put that in brackets because of how it works. In minus out divided by in. So again, I'm going to cheat here. I can grab this because I know it's correct. I can grab that function and we'll put it here. In minus out divided by in. And then I'm going to put the whole thing under parentheses times 100. Okay? That's my formula. This right here is my formula for my percent removal using my monthly average for each of those. And we're going to write it on the last day of the month. So if I go here and I go comma, if it's not the last day, the day of month isn't equal to it, then I'm not going to do it on those, so I will put in blank. So what this means is if it's not the last day of the month, if the day of the month is not equal to the length of the month, so in other words, the last day of the month, if it's not that, then I'm just going to leave the value blank. So if you look down here in my test value, I don't have a value because it's not the last day of the month. So if I come in here and I put it on the last day of the month, now I get a value because it is the last day of the month. Okay. But this just gives you a way of creating an if-then statement that allows it to work accordingly. We can do you can do any type of formula that you're going to need to make it work. Now, if I wanted this, let's say I wanted to put this on not the last day of the month, but I wanted the first of the month. If the day of the month is equal to 1, then on the first, I get a result. If I want to specify what day of the month it is, I can do that. Maybe you want to go, maybe you're doing a weekly average or something. Instead of month average, you're doing weekly average. You could go, instead of day of month, we can do day a week. And if the day of week is equal to 7, in other words, Saturday, then when you picked up a Saturday, you'd get a result. So these functions here, this day of the week, day of the month, and length of month and all that, they are all built into the program. These are things that you would look through the formula help. And you would go, and I think if I remember right, it's miscellaneous. Nope, it's not those. I always can never remember it. I think they're, yeah, it's under the date functions. Yeah, date functions. So day of month, day of week, day of year. So if you wanted it on the last day of the year, you could do that, and things along that lines. These are functions that are in here, okay? I'll change this here. But that is a little bit more complex formula, but it gives you the ability to see how those formulas are going to work and being able to put them on a given day so results can be done that way. You can also write these formulas that, even going more complex, if I write, I want a rolling average, for example, I need the rolling average of phosphorus. I run across that one a bit. And so at the end of the formula would be along times, it'd be if the day of month is equal to the length of month, same thing, but the formula would be different, that it looks back 3 months to the beginning of the year because it's a calendar year, and it would change every time. And again, just another aspect of that formula that you could do. So This gives you an idea. I mean, this is a very basic idea. We've covered actually a lot in here on formula-wise that allows us to go in and create formulas. Key things to remember. Number one, you're going to attach a formula to a location parameter. Do not attach, okay, here's a good example, and I didn't mention this. Don't attach that formula to the same spot that you're entering the result in. So I'm entering BOD results. I don't want to attach a formula to that because that's going to overwrite those formulas. So you got to think of it that way. So you always want to attach a formula to a given location parameter. When you write formulas and you're looking at formulas, things to remember is always go and when you're writing formula, use the formula help. Very important aspect. You got a lot of information in here that you could find. Like I said, there are literally hundreds of functions that can make your life easier when it comes to writing formulas. Okay. Other thing to remember is you can test them out. Remember that you can test those formulas and you can make them work. When you create a formula, think of your calc order. If you're having, like I said, if you're having to write formulas over and over again, make sure that they're in the right order. Come in here, go to the calc order. Make sure you have to move them up and down in the list if you have to. Once you have them done and you have a formula and you have it attached, this does give you an easy way of looking at it. When you run calculate, it runs them in that order. As I said, this is our basic operation of formulas. You will be able to see these if you are in a data view, for example, and I'm just going to go and pull one up. If you are in a data view and the location parameter that you're looking at has a formula attached to it, you will see this calculator right below it. At that point, you can always right click and you can see the formula right inside. So it'll actually bring up that formula editor that you looked at. Okay. So that gives you a way of seeing that when you're in a data view and you're looking at it. You don't have to go back out to the formula list to see what the formula is. You can do it right from in here. Okay. Now, with that said, what we're going to do is that is where we're at for today. Our next session that we do on formulas, one of the things we'd like to do is we would like to go and use real user submitted formulas. So if you have a formula that is that you would like to see done, maybe it's one you haven't done yet, or maybe you've done it and it's not working, send them to us. You'll get, we're not going to do all of them. There is a form that is going to be put out there. It's going to be sent out to you. That it's in the chat as well, but it'll also be sent out to you as well. That you can go ahead and put that formula in there and submit it to us. I will then take a look at those and hopefully they're not too difficult. But no, we'll go through and we'll add those in and we'll show you how to add those given formulas. May not do all of them, but what we have time for, we will add those in. Also in the next one, we are also going to go through a little bit more in depth on some I call crazy formulas, things that take a little bit more thought process, not very simple ones, but maybe it's a little bit more from that standpoint. So with that being said, thanks for attending the webinar today. Keep an eye out for when we send out for the next webinar. This is for this second part 2, so you can get signed up for that. If you have any questions, feel free to respond in the questionnaire that we send out, or you can send stuff to us and send me an email or send us an email and we will go and we will address any of those questions. If you have questions with formulas that you're working on and you need some help with one, let us know. And from a standpoint of a recording, yes, there will be a recording that will be put out for this, okay? So thank you very much. Hope you all have the recording will actually be going out later today, so just keep that in mind. So thank you very much for coming. We look forward to having you at our next webinar. Thanks a lot.